I think we've always had differences of opinion. We've always been a society where people can speak different things. We're not all meant to be on the same page. So it's about reframing it. Causing division? No. Causing debate? Yes. Interrupting conversations? Yes. Being a disruptor? Yes. Because that's what our people have always done.
He ahorangi hei horei, ko ia hoki tetahi e whakahihiri ana I te hunga ka takahi I te ara o Kairangi, ko ahorangi Mera Penehira tērā. He ahorangi no te whare wānanga o Awanuiarangi, a graduate from the Tohu Māoritanga Reo Māori program, mentored by one of the greats, Dr. Huirangi Waikereepuru, someone who did their masters in the 1990s and originally was told that she should be an air hostess or a weather girl, now a leading Māori academic alongside many other greats like distinguished Professor Linda Tuhiwai-Smith. It is people like Ahorangi Mera Penehira who are the consciences of our society, of our communities and of our hapu and iwi. Mea nei te kōrero a tēnei uri e te iwi o Ngāti Raukawa e haka tupuria ki Taranaki. Mea nei, Ahorangi Mera Penehira, Indigenous 100. E te ahorangi tēnā koe.
Kia ora, tēnā koe.
Nau mai ki tēnei hōtara. Nau mai ki te rau take Indigenous 100. He ahorangi koe. He pēhea nei tō whakamārama I tērā mahi e mahi ana koe I ai nei.
Well, he mahi I te tako o kuihua, he mahi hei āwhina I ngā mahi o te whariwānanga, I tēnei wā, te whariwānanga o Awanuiarangi. Hikitia I ona kaupapa, hikitia te mahi o ngā tauira o roto o te whariwānanga, āwhina I a rātou, kia oti pai a rātou mahi rangahau, a rātou akoranga katoa, hoi anō, ko te mahi tahi anō ki te taho o era atu, ahorangi, aha koa kei te hea whariwānanga, aha koa kei Aotearoa, kei tā wāhi rānei. Ai, he mahi tahi.
Koe nei te mahi I whae, I whakaaro hia rai nei e koe hei mahi māu, I te wā ia koe tupu ake ana?
Kao, I whakaaro au kia air hostess care.
Pono?
Pono?
Ne?
Me te kōrero o taku pāpa, tēnā pea, me haere koe hei air hostess ki te kore, weather presenter. Kore rawa au I whakaaro mo te mahi I roto I ngā whariwānanga.
Ne? Nā te hao tō pāpai whakaaro pērā ai?
E aua, I think. Ki ia, well, ko tāna, you know, ko te pāpa tēnei. Tino priti koe, me mahi koe tētahi mahi pērā. E kua ku mātua, kāri rātau I haere, kāri rāua I haere ki te whariwānanga, ki te aha rānei. O te kia I a rāua te mahi kura, I a rāua e āhua te kaumawhā, te kaumari matau. Ai, ko taku māma he kai tapahi makawe, hairdresser, ko taku pāpa he porter I roto I ngā hohipera. Me te mahi I roto I ngā pēni o taua wā, he drummer.
He patu pau. No hea rau?
No Taranaki taku māma, he hara I te me Māori, engari tupu aki ia I Taranaki. From Scotland and England, her ancestry is. And ko taku pāpa no Ngāti Raukawa no Rangitāne hoki. Engari tupu ake anō ki Taranaki.
Ki Taranaki. Te tāo tō māma, te whānau o tō māma. Ko te mahi a te whānau o tō māma, he mahi pāmu I te mea?
Ai, mahi pāmu. I runga I ngā whenua kua tāhaingia I ngā Pākehā. Kōrero anō tērā. Nā reire, ko tāku hei whakatikahia I tērā.
Kora tō whai anui I te newa ki o whakaaro?
Koe nā tētahi o aku mahi. Ai.
I te mea, ka te tiro atu ki ngā horangi pēnā I a koe nā. Ko taku te tiro, kei runga I a koutou poko whiwhi, ngā mahi hāpai te iwi. Ne? Ki te hia mātou, ki tehi kōrero, hei pāpare, I ngā takahi mai a te krauna I a tātou, ka te tiro mātou ki a koutou. Ka riro mā koutou, e whakakōrero, me pēhea, me aha. He anga putaketanga e rā mea katoa. Mahi nui tērā mahi ahora.
Ai, engari ko tāku, ko te whakarongo ki te kōrero o ngā whānau, o ngā hapu, o ngā iwi. Nō rātou aku kōrero. Ai, and ko au noi ho te waha. Ko au noi ho te waha. Me te mahi rangahau, ai, ka te pānui au ki ngā rangahau kia mōhi o rawatia, he aha te hitori, he aha anō ētahi mea hei āwhine i a tātou. Engari ko tāku, he waha noi ho mo te whānau mo te hapu.
Do you see yourself also testing the conscience of society, of government, of crown, of, for want of a better way of putting it, those with power, the authority? Do you see that as a pivotal role?
Oh, definitely. Conscience of society, or whatever they call it. I think that's a really important role that we play. I think we're well positioned. We are positioned with the freedom of speech to do that, even though in these times of the current political climate, even that can be risky.
I was going to say.
Yeah, but we, it is part of our role, and we have the research that sits behind us. We have the credentials that sit behind us that enable us to do that, and so it's incumbent on us to do so. That's our responsibility. We can't sit there and silently take the pay for a professor role and not do those kinds of things, not be the voice for people who would not otherwise be listened to. But for me, yes, I've got to make sure I'm up to date in terms of reading and literature and research, but for me it's most important to be on the ground with our whānau, with our hapu, in our communities, to hear what they're saying, and that's what we need to be putting forward.
There was a time, and I remember talking to Uncle Pat about this, they were kind of considered the radicals, particularly by governments. Uncle Pat, Matuarangi Nui, that ilk were seen to be very radicalised. They might have been a little bit liberal, but I never saw them as being that radical, because all they were doing was, as you were saying, giving voice to community, giving voice to hapu, giving voice to Māori, particularly in those times. I mean, you think back in the 70s. So is that a responsibility, do you see, because of that kind of lineage and history of those kinds of pantheons of Māori, is one way of putting it, that it is incumbent upon you to continue that legacy? Absolutely,
absolutely. They've paved the way for us to be there, and they haven't done that so that we can just sit there and do nothing about what's going on today. They've done that so that we can do the same as what they did before us. And it is really important that we are active, that we are proactive in the way that we speak and the things that we put forward within our institutions and the things that we put forward from our institutions. We've got to be brave. We've got to be prepared to have those courageous conversations that, sometimes they might put our jobs at risk. Sometimes they might gain us unwanted attention. But we've got to be prepared to do that, because that's the work. It's opening the doors for those that are yet to come.
Well, why does it put your job at risk? See, this is the thing that lots of people like me don't really understand. Well, now I'm of the community. I have a better understanding of it than I did. But we don't understand why someone who's a professor at a university is an institution. Its core role is academia, and also, as you say, representing the voices of the community. Why would your role be at risk by speaking out, or just being, speaking truth to power is a phrase that people use?
Well, sometimes the things that we say, the things that we need to say, are in opposition, of course, to the government, to current policy. The government, current policy are what dictates our funding to our institutions, and if we're speaking against that, we could be putting in jeopardy the funding and therefore the existence of our institutions. So we've got to think carefully about what we say and how we say it, but not be constrained by that. And fortunately for me, I'm in a whare wānanga, which, by its very existence is a proactive institution, and so we're well supported to have those kinds of conversations. But even there, we've still got to be careful as well, to a degree. But choose your battles, but also taking turns about who's going to be proactive on this front at this time and who needs to pick it up the next time, because you simply can't do everything. You can't be proactive on every take, on every kaupapa. You've got to be selective. It's also not, people don't want to hear from Mera all the time. Mera was last week's news. Next week we need Leonie to pick it up. Next month we need Linda Tuhiwai-Smith to pick something up. And so we do have those kinds of conversations too, to be honest. I need to sit back now. Someone else needs to take the reins for a little while. So that network, that collegial network.
Between and in amongst institutions.
So Māori working at this academic level are not concerned about which institution we're in. We need to be everywhere. So while it's my preference, and I'm definitely all for whare as the place of preference for our studies, I understand as well that we need Māori in all of these institutions, and we all need to support each other.
Yeah, I think it's very much the same in the media. People get surprised sometimes because, I'm texting Moana going, "What's on your show this week? We're doing this." So we don't cross over, and we try and see it as a collegial kind of effort, right? Because we uphold the same kind of tikanga when we're doing the mahi that we're doing, and people get surprised by that. So it certainly makes sense to me. The other bit I wanted to pick up on, and speaking about Crown and government and that kind of thing, is that there was a time, and I think I'm seeing and hearing more of this now, where the charges people like you, who are well informed and educated, and also not backward in coming forward about certain issues that need to be discussed and researched, that sometimes the charges people like you and Māori professors are the ones who are causing the division by the work that we're doing, rather than the politicians who are the ones who are implementing the policy. When you call out action, well, look at what's happening with the tribunal. That they're the ones that are being accused of divisive in terms of what they're doing and curtailing the process of democracy. How do you respond when you hear charges like that? Radical left academia, elite, Māori elite, causing division, that kind of thing. What do you think, and how do you respond when you hear that kind of thing?
I'm not worried about causing division. I think we've always had differences of opinion. We've always been a society where people can speak different things. We're not all meant to be on the same page. We're meant to have debate that's healthy. Our tupuna did that, and we need to be doing it now. So it's about reframing it. Causing division? No. Causing debate? Yes. Interrupting conversations? Yes. Being a disruptor? Yes. Because that's what our people have always done. So it's not because I'm an academic, it's because I'm Māori. That's what being Māori is.
Kia ora whakaaro Māori tuatai, Māori tōmua.
Ai, Māori tōmua, academic, muri iho, but it's the position as a professor and the position as an academic sometimes affords you voice where I might not otherwise have had that. So it's, as we were talking before, it's incumbent on us to use that position and use that voice that we have, but use that voice to project not just ngā whakaaro a Mera Penehira kao, but ngā whakaaro a te whānau, a te hapu.
Nō nā hea tō timatanga mai ki te ao o te ara mātauranga e whai ana, e takahi ana, e koe ai ane.
I wehe au I te kura haere tō tika ki te whare wānanga o Waikato.
Hea koe haere ai ki Waikato?
Tata ki te kuiti. I reira au e tupu ana. I could not move too far from home. I'm a small town country girl, and so I went there, and my first undergraduate degree was a teaching degree, early childhood teaching degree.
I hea rānei koe kia tū hei kaiako? I hea koe kia tū hei kaiako a te tau?
Ai.
Kaiako o kura tahi?
No, early childhood. Kohanga reo. So I think I was 19 years old when I got my first teaching position in a kindergarten in Inglewood and experienced extreme racism. Nobody thought I was a teacher. They all thought I was the cleaner or someone's big sister coming to pick up a child. Anyway, I didn't I thought that was about me being young. I didn't understand that was about me being Māori. I soon understood.
How did that happen? How did you come to understand that?
Well, because there were lots of other young Pākehā teachers in the region who were not experiencing the same thing. I thought, oh, what's the uncommon factor here? Right, Māori. Okay, yeah. But yeah, it's a very redneck community, Inglewood, and although that was where my mother was raised, but my mother was Pākehā, so I had no idea of that experience until I went there. Hoianō, what I decided to do was, I think I lasted 3 years in Pākehā early childhood institutions, and I couldn't progress anything Māori there. And so I decided I need to be in kohanga reo, but kore kautaku reo. So I went and sat in wānanga, was very lucky to do wānanga reo in Taranaki for 2 years with the likes of Huirangi and
Was
Te
that at the
Ururoa.
Polytech?
Yes.
Gee, that was a vibrant time, eh?
It was a very vibrant time. Really fortunate to have been part of that time. And then cemented that with teaching in kohanga reo for about 10, 12 years.
Did you think, ko whakaaro I tēnā wai mana, yep, ko au tēnei. Haere ake, koe ni tuku mai. Ne?
Aye.
Hea hai huri ai?
Well, I au I roto i ngā kohanga reo o Taranaki. I reire ētahi tamariki, tamariki haua meki. So we were inviting in special education services to assist our kids who were turi, who needed speech language therapy or who had behavioural challenges, and there was nobody that could do that in Te Reo Māori in special education services at that time. So I decided to come up to Auckland and train as an early intervention specialist, specialising in behaviour management, and and so that's what took me out of kohanga reo, but then placed me back in as a specialist support person working around South Auckland and the wider Auckland region for about 10 years. We developed the first, probably to this day, it's still the only kaupapa Māori early intervention service in Aotearoa. Yeah.
So ko te whakaaro mutu ana tēnā, ko te whakaaro ke hoki ki te kohanga reo? I roto ngā ūtono ki ngā mahi kohanga reo?
Ai, ko tērā te whakaaro I tērā wā, engari kātahi ka mutua I taku early intervention diploma, whakaaro ake au mo te mahi psychology, educational psychology. I te mea, I was working for special education services in Manukau, and I picked up a pamphlet one day in reception about educational psychology and training, and one of the Pākehā educational psychologists saw me and she said, "Oh, what are you looking at that for?" I said, I think this is something I'd like to do. She said, "Don't be silly, you can't do that. It's above your league pretty much." So I was sold. I'm going to be an ed psych. And she needn't have said anything more. And so I did my master's in educational psychology.
Wow.
And thought that was going to be me.
Yeah.
And then I was about to go and do an internship in educational psychology, and Linda Tuhiwai-Smith and Michael Walker were just establishing Ngā Pai o Te Māramatanga, the Centre of Research Excellence for Māori.
So 1990 something or other.
Yeah,
Yeah.
late 90s. And Linda said, "Hey, why don't you come and work with us and help us establish this centre?" You know, I was a junior very much in that process. I was like, my idols asked me. Asked me to go and do this work. See you later, education psychology. And that was really my foray into harder academic work, I guess, or higher academic work. So you can't be working with Linda Smith and Michael Walker and not think about doing a doctorate, right?
Yeah.
You kind of can't. It would be rude not to. So yeah, that's how I got into academia more deeply.
How tō kaupapa mo tō tuhinga kaore?
Yeah, it was moko as a healing practice.
Yes.
So
how did this come about?
Well, it came about because there was a project within Ngā Pai o Te Maramatanga, led by one of our colleagues, Clive Assman,
Oh, yes.
at the time, and the project was centred on people with bloodborne viruses and removing inequities and looking at Indigenous modes of healing for people with bloodborne viruses. So he said, do your doctorate in my project. And I'm like, I know nothing about bloodborne viruses. Yes, I know things about inequities, okay. Yes, I know things about gender inequities. So then we had to find a niche within that. And so the niche was for me to work with wāhine Māori who had hepatitis C, a bloodborne virus, who had explored moko as a healing intervention.
Because late 1990s, there were still not many wāhine wearing that had moko kaua at that time, late 90s. There were a few, but...
Yeah, no, we were pretty elite then. Now we're just one of many. I quite enjoyed those times, no? Where people were still saying, oh, you must be a princess.
But of course.
But now there's too many princesses. No, you're right. But the women that I talked to hadn't had moko kaua. They'd used moko in different parts of their body. But all used it and saw it as a healing intervention. So exploring the intersections between gender identity, moko, healing.
Was there... Okay, so having gone through the process now, I can kind of talk a little bit about some things that kind of interest me.
Be careful, you're not past yet.
No, I haven't. I know. I didn't say I was good at it, by the way. Was there a lot of literature on moko at that time?
No, not a lot, but
So
obviously the work of Ngā Hui Te Awe Kōtuku.
Oh, yes. Okay,
and there were, 3 or 4 pieces of literature around moko. So you've just got to look wider and wider. So not a lot around moko and not a lot around women in moko, but enough to start me off. And then lots around identity, lots around culture and identity, lots around gender and identity. So you just pull those threads together.
Okay, and I'm going to ask you about triangulation soon too, but I'll come to
Oh, scary.
No. Well, and there's a reason, because I also want to talk about the Indigenous element, which is why I think it's really important as Māori researchers. The more we can use Indigenous-wide research as a part of our process, I think it's really important. But I want to talk about methodology, because it took me ages to understand, and I don't even know if I understand it now, to be honest with you. But what was your methodology? And then I'm going to ask you to explain what a methodology is. But what was your methodology for your thesis?
Kaupapa Māori methodology was it. That was the overarching framework I developed.
Not to with Linda.
Was
she your supervisor?
She was my supervisor.
Okay.
Clive was another of my supervisors, and Ngā Hui Te Awe Kōtuku as well. So that was the overarching. And I think, in this time now and in the last 10 years, people have gone kaupapa Māori and this and this and that. I'm not a fan of multiple methodologies. I think kaupapa Māori is enough, or mātauranga Māori, or those two things combined, they're enough in themselves. And within that, you can develop more specific research approaches. And so that's what I did. I was really fortunate that Huirangi Waikirepuru was still a great mentor to me and supported me developing a framework which we named Manakai Te Akitanga, or the power to protect. And that had 7 elements within it. But that sat as a research approach within a kaupapa Māori framework. Methodology is about the values, the ideas, and the theory, I guess, that underpins the way you're going to go about your research. And that is distinct from methods, which are the tools or the ways that you go about gathering your research data, gathering the information to answer your research question.
And that's where the quantitative, qualitative, and mixed method stuff comes in. Just to come back on methodology though, how important was it for you to make sure that not only was your methodology applicable, obviously, to your kaupapa, but also potentially applicable to other research or indeed other things that people could do in the field?
I think it's a really good question. It's a really good thing to talk about. It's something we talk about with our students currently, is recognising that as a Māori researcher, as a kaupapa Māori researcher, as an Indigenous researcher, you are contributing to and building on the work of people who have gone before you. So you have a responsibility, in my view, to do a good job of it, to show what it is to be a good kaupapa Māori researcher, to be pono in your mahi. And also you have a responsibility to think about how that contributes to the broader global context of Indigenous research.
Right.
Because everyone is looking at everyone's work in this Indigenous world, and rightly so. So what we do, you never know where it's going to be picked up. You never know who's going to look at it and what they're going to make of it. So you need to be very clear in your methodology, you need to be very clear in your methods, you need to be very clear in analysing the information that's been shared with you, the data that's been shared with you, and then making some really good, smart and grounded comments about what the key findings are that people can understand.
Do I need to, or do people need to be doing work that achieves an outcome? Or is it enough to say, here's a question, I don't know if the answer, if this is the answer, and I don't know if I'm right, but through my methodology, I've actually contributed in some way, shape or form that someone else can pick up a thread, potentially apply it to their research. Because I when I read kaupapa Māori theory, I felt like, oh, holy heck, I've got a responsibility now to actually do something that's of the benefit to the community, which I didn't know I had to do. I thought it was a really selfish process, to be honest with you.
Yeah. No, you absolutely have to do something that's going to make a difference.
Yeah.
This is not about Mera getting a DR in front of her name or about Julian getting PhD behind its name. It is absolutely, I mean, that's just what happens as a result of it. But what has to happen, if you are being true to a kaupapa Māori approach, and if you are working and doing your research in Te Whare Wānanga a Wīnui, you are required to do research that is going to have a positive impact, a transformative impact on whānau, hapu and iwi. And it's not just the impact that you think should happen in those communities, it's an impact that aligns to what communities want. It's an impact that your research has to align to what whānau, hapu and iwi see as important, not just what I've dreamed up as a good idea.
Did you know that before you did your doctorate? Did you know that you had a responsibility for that transformative element that you talked about?
I didn't know it before I went into it. I learnt it very quickly because I was so fortunate to be supervised by the people I was supervised by. And that, I think that's the key to being a well-grounded academic, is to make sure that you're with academics that not just have a good reputation, but you can see the fruits of their work. Those are the people you want to be with, not the people that have climbed the ladder the fastest in the universities. More often than not, the people that have taken the longest to get there are the people who have been really pono to their work. Māori.
I te mea hangai ana ki te hapu, ki te whānau, ki te hapori era mea katoa. Ai whakapauka ki rera, ne? Okay, so I mentioned triangulation, and I still don't think I understand it, by the way, but anyway. Because
Triangle.
Yeah,
3 sides.
the instrument I played in the school, anyway.
There you go, you've got it.
No, but the reason I ask it is because I honestly thought triangulation was simply Māori research, Pākehā research about Māori or your kaupapa, Māori, Pākehā, iwi taketake, all other Indigenous. That's how I thought triangulation was.
Right.
Didn't realise I was completely wrong about that. But
That's one way.
that was literally my methodology when I started. I thought, ka whai koe triangulation. What is triangulation when people talk about it in an academic sense?
It's really checking your analysis, what you think you're seeing in the data that you've collected. So you ask questions, you interview people, you write that up and you come up with an analysis. But how do you know if your analysis is true or is valid? You check what others have said about similar kinds of things. That's what triangulation is. And triangulation, it is about having three sides. It is about checking it from three different points. But those 3 points could be 3 kaupapa Māori researcher views, or they could be 1 kaupapa Māori view and 2 iwi takitaki, for example. But triangulation means checking it out in 3 different ways.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then you're tested and examined by your peers, or indeed examiners, those who have gone through the process, those who are in academia. They check that, they review it, and they tell you whether you pass or fail. If that is a process in academia, why is the same process not applied to government policy?
Well, that's a great question.
You know, because you literally, well, let's take a live example. Tobacco, cigarettes, and the new policy from the. I don't see any triangulation in that process at all. Why is it that those people with the biggest budget don't apply the same kind of rigorous process in terms of the investigation and implementation and the development of the policy that academia does? And yet academia gets a hell of a lot more investigation from the external. I don't understand why we allow that process to occur.
I mean, that's our political system, isn't it? That's what we're allowing to happen, and that's what we need to question. That's what we need to challenge, because it's not good enough. Those policies, the government decisions would impact on our health and well-being, which we know is pretty crap compared to others in the world. So yeah, I think it's incumbent on us to continue to demand that, to ask for more robust research behind the decisions that are coming out of our government, to ask where the evidence is that this is what's going to be best for us, and to not be satisfied with those comments that really are flyaway and do not provide us with the evidence. Need to keep pushing for that.
Ki o whakaaro koe rā tētahi o ngā mahi nui mā te ahorangi I roto I ngā rā ka heke nei. Checks and balance.
Ai.
Hari te mahi māma, ne? Ka hoki aki ki tō kōrero e pāna ki ngā pānga mai pēr, ne? Ki ngā ahorangi roto o ngā whare wānanga. E hara I te mahi māma?
E hara I te mahi māma, engari kia mahi tahi mātou ko ngā ahorangi, mātou I roto I ngā whare wānanga, ka māma ake. So we've got to share the load between us. We've got to choose who's good to do this, who's good to do that, and take turns so that we are sustainable. Because it can get exhausting. You know, there are those of us that receive death threats, for example, when we come out and speak publicly. When I spoke about Sally, Pākehā woman, Moko Kauai,
yes.
I received death threats.
Really?
Yes, yeah. I was, that was a difficult time, because who was I to tell someone that they couldn't have Moko Kauai? How dare I needed to be rid of.
What's that? Like, there must be a whole bunch of things you go through when that happens. How did you receive? Was it emails or?
There were emails, but there were things in social media that actually I wasn't even aware of, because I wasn't, at that time, wasn't on social media very much at all. And so others brought it to my attention, but brought it to my attention with support. So, you know, there were people like Moana Jackson that would ring me up and go, "You doing okay? I've seen this has come out. How are you doing? Keep going." Those kind, you know, calls from amazing people like Moana and others of my colleagues that would just say, "It's all right, stay there, hang in there."
Was there some security in knowing that they probably received death threats themselves a number of times?
I thought, oh, cool, I'm in good company.
I made it.
I've made it. I mean, yeah, to be up there with Moana Jackson, that was pretty cool. No, but seriously.
But it must be scary though, Ahorangi.
It is scary. And, you know, people don't think about it, but, you know, single mother, young daughter, she was also seeing me on the news and people, you know, talk to her about it at kura and whatever. And she's like, Mum, do you really have to do that? You know. Yeah.
Yeah, kids don't sign up for your career, eh?
They do not. And so that is something to think about as well. And that's where sometimes it's important for us to take turns, you know. My kids had enough of that for now. I need to be out of the limelight for the next 6 months or whatever.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not that I'm there much, but at that time, yeah, I was being called on quite a bit for commentary on that in particular, and it was really apparently quite radical at the time. I thought it was pretty cut and dried, you know. These are tupuna markings. You haven't got tupuna Māori, so what are you doing with that on your chin? And then you know, and there was all the backlash with the, you know, our moko artists and the ones that agreed with it and the ones that didn't agree with it. And so, yeah, I was accused of division again at that time, but take the point, it's different schools of thought. It's not division, it's healthy debate. Would have been healthier if they just were quiet, but...
Well, I guess the other thing is you can say, well, here's my thesis, where's yours?
Yeah, no, I don't like playing that card.
You don't?
No, I don't mind doing that.
With other academics?
I don't mind doing that with Pākehā. I don't mind doing that with Pākehā media in particular. Yeah. So, you know, I think in one of the interviews I was asked, well, what gives you the right to talk about that, Mera Penehira? Oh, I did a doctoral thesis on it. That's what gives me the right.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I guess that's what I was talking about. Was it
yes.
But yeah, it must also be a little bit difficult when you are dealing with your own. You know? I mean, we get it all the time in media. And actually, I did want to ask you, because I think it's important to ask these things, about how you feel Māori media, the role of Māori media, and yes, the media landscape is changing, but in those kind of instances, how you feel how well we do as Māori media and the way in which we talk about those things, because we are kaupapa Māori in action, supposedly. We are the recipients of the work of lots of different people who have done a lot of different things for the benefit of te reo and te kanga. We're meant to be upholding that kind of responsibility and being kaupapa Māori in action. So how do you view the role of Māori media and the way in which we do what we do? And be honest, because
I think because I'm on Māori media now. No, but I think Māori media has grown exponentially in the last 20 years. I mean, I think back to the beginnings of whakaaro Māori, it was a totally different scene, and although that was radical and proactive at the time, it still mirrored in many ways the broader sector of the media. That's not so much the case anymore. And you know, beautiful prime example of how Māori media has grown up and how powerful it is was the Tangianga, Kingi Tu Heitia. You know, never seen anything like that before. How amazing, and that's the power of Māori media. And Māori media has to be responsible for giving that different voice, for doing a different approach, for not trying to look for us to all be on the same page and not looking to call us divisive, but rather to invite that public debate as something that is what we've always done.
Can I ask you a question about that? Do you think, this is getting really insular now, but you know, when you've got an academic, you take the opportunity. It's not often you get a voice of reason, right? So do you think we should be, because people will say, yep, you are there to debate the issues. And sometimes to debate the issues, you have to call on the David Seymours and the Don Brashers and those kinds of people, because they are the ones who are causing some interest in different things. Other people will say, no, you're platforming these people. And there are enough of those voices on other platforms. So why platform these people on our platforms? Why aren't you giving voice to just ourselves? And it's always a tension about that, Ahorangi, about how you balance that off right. Should you be allowing, you know, Don Brash to have a debate with someone else about whatever it might be, when you should just be talking to your own. How do you think? And I'm asking for advice as well as taking the opportunity, but I'm just interested because I think these are certain issues that we're dealing with all the time. Because we come to academics all the time when we want to talk about different things.
I think we can hear David Seymour and the likes of them anywhere else. So I'm not so interested in hearing or seeing them in Māori media. I'd love to give space to more of our own diversity. Debates amongst ourselves, I think, are really healthy. We know what they're saying, But okay, sometimes we've got to give them space in order that we can educate, in order that we can argue against, in order that we can interrupt and disrupt what they're saying. So for that purpose, I think there's a place. But I think there's a lot to be said for waiting. So how much time are we giving there? How much time are we giving here? So not being random about it, being very intentional. This is the amount of time that we want for Māori. That's the majority of the time in Māori media should be devoted to Māori and to the diversity of Māori voice. Okay, we'll give this much time to non-Māori.
No way. You mentioned a couple of times huirangi waikerepuru. And I, for one, was we never got to give Huirangi the farewell that he deserved as Māori broadcasters. I mean, he was our godfather.
That's right.
He was our. I know he was from Taranaki with a little bit of Ngāpuhi he fused in, but
yes,
we all saw him as our kaumātua, no matter where he came from. And you said that he was one of your mentors. What was he like? Because I know what he was like from the broadcasting perspective, but what was he like as a mentor?
Oh, he was awesome. He's one of those people that could take the most complex of ideas, the most complex theories, the most complex knowledge systems, and talk to you about them in ways that you could understand, and talk to you about them in ways that had meaning for that marae, for that whānau, and for that hapu. He wasn't into rhetoric, he wasn't into big long speeches. In fact, he would get frustrated when men stood up and spoke on and on and on. He could get straight to the point. He didn't need to take a long time. He understood people at the beginning of their reo journey because he too had had a reo journey. So he was a mentor in his being. He was a beautiful example of someone who could climb to the highest echelons of te reo Māori in his lifetime and then share that with all of us. He was very kind, he was funny, he was hilarious.
He was trendy too, eh?
He was trendy, he was cheeky. I remember one time I took him and my grandmother for dinner at the Cobb & Co in New Plymouth. And I can't remember why. I must have had a clash of things, so I bought the two. I thought, well, too bad. I meant to be with both of them tonight. Well, we can have dinner all together. And this is my Pākehā Scottish grandmother and huirangi. And she asked him, have you ever been to England? And he said, yes. And she said, what did you go for? And he said, well, I went for reclaiming te reo Māori.
Privy Council.
Yes. And she said, oh, what do you mean? Anyway, he just sat there and had this beautiful conversation explaining it to her. And she said, what did you think of the palace? And he said, I thought maybe I should blow it up. That was huirangi. He was charming, he was witty, he was funny, but he was just so sharp. Just so sharp.
Yeah. And the other name you mentioned a couple of times is Moana Jackson. And I'm not bringing these names up for the sake of, I just think the profound impact these people had is long lasting. I think it will be long lasting. And thankfully we've got a lot of people who benefited from sitting in their shade for a long time. And we're hearing from those people now, which is great. But the concern I have, and maybe this is a forlorn thing, but is that we might not see the likes of those people again. And that worries me. We have thought leaders, absolutely. We've got people who benefited from hearing and from being taught by and mentored by these people like yourself. But that ilk, I feel like we're losing that ilk of people. And will we ever get that back, do you think? Aorangi? I mean, what keeps you awake at night? Is it things like that? This is what I think about. Maybe I'm just a weirdo, aorangi, but that's what I think about. You laugh because it sounds like you agree, but...
You've become a PhD. No, it's nothing to do with the PhD. Yeah, I don't think we'll ever see another Huirangi or another Moana Jackson.
Wow.
But we'll see the fruits of their work in others. And so we see it, I can see it already, but it's, it's dissipated, I guess, amongst a wider group of people who are yet to grow into their fullness. So I look forward to seeing what happens with the seeds that they've planted. The people that were closest to Huirangi, for example, seeing them, watching them grow into who they are because of him. And the same with Moana Jackson. I wasn't as close at all to Moana or to Huirangi as many other people were. But I enjoy watching. And you can see in people the little remnants that those wonderful men have left. Yeah.
I remember talking to Huirangi. He came with us to Taiwan one time. Oh, they loved him. They loved him. There was a thing we had where they did a ceremony. We went into a... no, actually, I won't tell the whole of that story. But anyway, we went into this wānanga, and the women went into their wānanga, and the men went into this wānanga. And then we came out of that process, and they put him in this chair, and there was a fire over here and a fire over here, and they had music blasting. They put him in this chair. Then they threw him up in the air. He was like 81 or 2 or something. And we were like, hey! And then they caught him, and then they did it about, and he was... And the whole time he was like, hey, like he loved it. But, I think it was just interesting that, and I wanted to talk about in, the other part about research on behalf of benefiting Indigenous communities, because, it became very clear to me, particularly in the broadcasting media landscape, that they saw Māori television, now whakaaro Māori, as a bit of a leader, as a forerunner, like Kuangaro, like Kurukapapa. Given your knowledge, and I know you're doing a lot of work with people in Hawaii through your mahi, is that still the case? Or do you think things have started to turn a bit now, that other Indigenous communities are far more advanced than us in different things, that we should be actually taking a really good look at now?
I think it's always been the case that we can learn from other Indigenous communities, that there are things that they've been definitely more proactive in, have been more successful in terms of reclaiming. For example, I really look up to our tuakana in Hawaii, the women and the reclamation work that they've done in terms of their women's role in ceremony and so on and so forth. I think they were doing that before we were really doing that. Or we were doing it, but they were doing it in such a powerful way and with much more intention. So I think there have always been things that we're great at, things that they're great at, and I'm very careful in my work overseas. It's not hard, but very careful to respond when people talk about our leadership and us being at the forefront of things like language reclamation, and just really clear to say there's some stuff that we've done well, there's a lot of stuff we've still got to get better at.
What do we need to get better at?
I think we need to get better at, for example, if I'm thinking about kura kaupapa and wharekura, fabulous, wouldn't have had my girl anywhere else, wouldn't have spent the last 13 years anywhere else apart from te kura kaupapa Māori or Hoani Waititi. But we can get better at educating our kids about the political context in this country. We can get better at arming them with the political tools that they require when they leave Waititi Marae and go to the University of Waikato, for example, and then encounter a completely different space that simply haven't been aware of. So I think we can get better at arming them with stronger political education, stronger political analysis.
So you're not talking civics, right? You're talking politics in the wider sense of it.
Yeah, understanding, I guess we created kura kaupapa and wharikura in order for our kids to see that as natural and normal. And we've achieved that. What we've also achieved, though, is that they don't understand that it wasn't always natural and normal, and that it's not natural and normal for the rest of the world, for the rest of Aotearoa. What's natural and normal at Whānei Waititi Marae is not natural and normal beyond that. And I want them to understand the historical context which birthed Whānei Waititi.
Yeah. That's a really good... Maharu te tei wai, te mātakitaki pōka whakaata Māori mate, o tamariki. And e tamariki tūna anga tamariki te rāwa. E ka menga mai te tei woku te maine. Maroke tēnei kaupapa. And I went, hey, tērā te tahi wā.
Yes, I know. And
Ko tahi te reo ni rangi Māori, tērā te reo.
And they're like, kai mātua kia koe, papa. Yes.
Maybe it's a bit like, the old man talking about when he walked to school in Kauranga and how hard life was.
That's right.
But I was like going, hey, kare koe mahara, tērā te tahi wā, hore koe mea, ko tahi, atu ia te karere. Mei te pāuka whakaata, e rā mea katoa. But the other thing I think you're talking about, though, is that it's not just about the readiness of our tamariki getting out of wharekura, but also tā tātou whakamāori ake, whakatika ake rānei ngā whare wānanga pēnei me te whare wānanga o wakato. E rā mō mā huaranga katoa, ne?
That's right. Those universities need to be ready for our children, and they simply are not at this point in time. I'm not sure if they ever will be. In fact, I believe whare wānanga tūturu is the best place for our kids. However, I understand that they want to explore different things, and so it is therefore an important responsibility of those universities that are receiving our kids to be ready. We shouldn't be having to prepare our kids for those spaces. Those spaces need to prepare for our kids. And things like, as simple as kids coming out of kura kaupapa are not allowed to do, for example, Reo Māori 101 because they're already beyond that. So they have to do something harder than the Pākehā kids who can do Reo Māori 101. That's not fair. That's inequitable.
You mentioned with our Hawaii whanaunga, the work of ngā wāhine ki Hawaii and ceremony. I want to ask you about what we need to change when it comes to what many people call processes or rituals of ceremony in Māoridom. Where do you think we should be making change? And you made a comment earlier, and I don't disagree with you, around, and this happened actually at the tangihanga of Kingi Tuhatia, where some of the oratory was superfluous and elongated, and in many occasions wasn't necessarily hangai to the kaupapa. Where do we need to make change? Aorangi, do you think in terms of those rituals of encounter in other places that should happen pretty quickly or need to happen? Do you think?
I think we need to continue to uplift, highlight, revere and respect the role of women, our traditional roles and our contemporary roles. So I'm not for or against women speaking on the pai. I think that is absolutely up to each marae and each hapu to determine that. So I don't really make comment on that, generally speaking. But I do think all of us need to think about how it is that we revere the role of women that exists wherever it exists. I think I've definitely seen changes, for example, in karanga over the last 30 years. You know, there was a time when, there's still places where this happens, but it was almost every time you would arrive for a pohuri of whatever sort, And everyone ducked for cover when asking who would be the kaikaranga, except if there was some, extremely elder kuia there, then you knew, oh, phew, we're safe. That happens less and less and less now. And the status of the karanga, the exquisite reo that is now being used in karanga is amazing, amazing. And I'd like to see us doing more to reclaim that really special level of reo that is ours to own, ours to be responsible for, and ours to continue to progress. Similarly with waiata, all of those things. It used to be, and it still happens, but a man would finish his kōrero and then he'd start the waiata, and we'd be sitting there going, what's that about? That happens less and less now. Good, it should happen less and less. That's not, your role is that, this is ours. So for me that's a really important starting point for, it's not necessarily change, but for us to continue to progress.
The other thing I think, and again, given you work at a whare wānanga Māori, I'm currently a student of, should whare wānanga Māori be the places in which we have those really intense debates? You're absolutely right. Manae hapu, pai hapu, kei rātou tō rātou mana, ki runga ki tō rātou ake whenua, ki runga ki tō rātou ake marae e rā mea katoa. But do you think the whare wānanga Māori provides us an opportunity to just sit back a bit and go, right, let's have a really intense kōrero about this, and this. Provide the space and the opportunity for that to happen, and then kōrero wānanga those things out.
I do. I think it's a safe place for us to wānanga those kinds of ideas, to debate the issues therein. No, I don't think we do. I think we should be brave and do it more and more and more. I think so. It is about shifting the frame from it being divisive, as we've already talked about, or from it, causing that division, separating us, not all being on the same page. I think we need to get comfortable again with not being on the same page. We need to remember this is part of our way of being. This is what our tupuna did. They didn't all sit down and agree with each other. They had rampant arguments and debates, and that was how we progressed, and that's what we need to continue to do. I think whare wānanga tūturu is a great space to do that in. I'm concerned when we do that in Pākehā institutions where Pākehā can use that division of thought that we might have, all those different viewpoints, they can use that to be divisive. So we've got to be really careful about where we have those debates. We've got to create the safe spaces. We've got to understand the implications if we're having those debates in non-Māori spaces, and I'm not really interested in those kinds of debates.
So a couple of final questions, if you don't mind. Where does the name Mera come from?
Huirangi.
Ne.
Yes, so doing wānanga reo in Taranaki in the 80s, everyone had to have a Māori name. I was named after my auntie, who died shortly before I was born. Her Māori name was Rangatahi.
Oh.
But my nana gave me her English name, which is Melda, because her view was that name was too taumaha for me, Rangatahi. So I go into Huirangi's class as Melda, and he says, "Koe te ingoa Māori?" I go, "Koriko." He goes, "Okay, ko mera koe." That's where mera comes from.
Wow. Rangatahi ora. This is Rangatahi ora kiri moko i te tiriti o Waitangi, Rangatahi ora. Wow. Was she named after that tupuna?
Yes.
Wow.
Yes, and koina taku moko kauai.
Ka Rangatahi ora. Oh, Rangatahi ora, ko te rangihiro anō ne? Same kōrero, I think. Rangatahi ora. Oh yes, no, Rangatahi ora. Nānei kauhoi. Yes. Wow, I didn't know that.
So kāre au I whiwhi tōna ingoa, engari whiwhi au I tāna kauai.
Tōna kauai. Me te ingoa mere. Gee, too much matua huitangi. Okay, and then And then the other thing I wanted to ask was, you know, if you had any advice for, say someone's pooranga enough to do a doctorate. And
Someone is.
well, many, as you were telling me earlier, we can't reveal the results yet, but you know, people will see soon. But and I think more and more people are doing this, which I think is awesome, actually, because as you said, you undertake that type of a Māori methodological approach, you get outcomes. People are going to transform communities. I think that's the awesome thing about it. So I think more people are doing it, the better. Then what? What should people do after that?
It's really just the beginning. So
See, people say that, and I was going, no, I thought that was...
I know, stink. Well, then what? You carry on your work and you've got a whole lot of new skills. So you become the policy writer at the kura. You become the, the person that gives analysis to the media stuff at the kura or at the marae or whatever. You apply your doctoral skills to your community. For me, that's the biggest next step that happens.
Is that what happened with you?
Well, it did, but it wasn't intentional.
Really?
So now I talk to people about it and say, give some intentionality to it, because for the duration of you doing your PhD, you're not able to do as much as you would like to do or would normally do at the marae or at the kura or wherever else. So give yourself permission to take some time out from that. Get your replacements in place so that you can focus on your PhD while you're doing that, but then be intentional and think about what are the skills that you take back when you return to the marae, when you return to the kura.
And that should be during that process as you're doing it.
Yeah, I think it's good to be intentional about it while you're learning. I wasn't. It surprised me. It was, I was constantly around other doctoral scholars and other academics and so on. So I was kind of taking it for granted, the skills that I was developing in terms of reading and analysing, gathering information, analysing and being able to write it up really quickly, being able to be succinct in my writing and so on and so forth. So when I guess re-immersed myself or took on bigger roles once I'd finished the doctorate within community, then I thought, not everyone can do this actually. That's a skill I've got. Choice. Yay, use it.
You see, but the problem is that we don't think of ourselves as a Runa Tui Mai Smith or Leone Pihamora, Mera Penehira.
No, we don't.
You know, and is there a point at which that kind of imposter syndrome thing stops?
I don't think of it as imposter syndrome.
It's probably the wrong way to put it, but you...
No, it's a real thing that people talk about, and I say, well, just stop talking about it, because if you name it as that, then you're going to be it, right? So don't manifest being an imposter. But I think just being ourselves, do what you do your best work wherever you are, and you just become what you become. It doesn't. You're not trying to be a Linda, you're not trying to be a Leone, you just, I'm just trying to be a good meta. And I think there's no complexity to it. Just try and be the best Julian, the best meta, the best whoever you are. And if you've listened well, if you continue to listen well, then your best is going to be awesome. Yeah.
I've got the list of things I said we were going to talk about.
We didn't
half of
cover
which
them.
we did. The other half we didn't. I won't read them out. Everyone will go, but what about that? Engari e mihi ana. Tēnā koe I whai wahi mai koe, I whakapuake koe I waka whakaaro, me te whakahihiri I te hunga I a ngai kairangi te haere ake ne. I a ngai kairangi te haere ake ne. Tau reire te ahorangi tēnā.
Kia ora, tēnā koe.